In the quiet moments before history announces itself, the most ordinary objects often carry the deepest secrets. A small copper coin, a familiar face, a year most people think they already understand. But tonight, that certainty begins to crack. Somewhere between a pocket's loose change and a collector's vault lies a story few have fully grasped. Don't look away, a broken bar. This part changes everything. In 2009, America was standing at a crossroads. The nation was reeling from financial collapse. Trust in institutions was fragile, and families across the country were relearning what value truly meant. It was also the year the United States quietly marked 200 years since the birth of Abraham Lincoln, a man whose image had stared back from the penny for a full century. To most Americans, the bicentennial Lincoln pennies felt like a simple tribute. 4 designs, a historical nod, something nostalgic to slip into a jar. But beneath that calm surface, something wasn't right. The penny had always been America's most democratic coin, passed hand to hand, forgotten in couch cushions, saved by children. In 2009, that tradition collided with history itself. The mint replaced the familiar Lincoln Memorial with 4 scenes from Lincoln's life, each meant to honor a chapter of a journey from frontier cabin to the White House. Collectors applauded. The public barely noticed. Yet from the moment the first of these coins entered circulation, quiet questions began to surface, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. One of those 4 designs depicted Lincoln's early years, a humble log cabin rising from the Kentucky frontier. The imagery was deliberate, almost reverent. But some examples of this coin, bearing no mint mark at all, began to behave differently in the marketplace. They didn't look rare, they didn't feel special. And yet, seasoned collectors paused when they saw them, because collectors still argue about this detail: a broken bar. Why did certain no-mint mark examples feel subtly different in hand? To understand why this coin matters, you have to understand 2009 itself. The U.S. Mint was under extraordinary pressure. Metal prices were volatile, production schedules were compressed. Billions of pennies were still required for circulation, even as debate raged over whether the penny should exist at all. The mint adjusted compositions, tweaked processes, and pushed output to meet demand. In moments like that, history teaches us something uncomfortable. Mistakes happen, variations slip through, and some are never meant to be seen. The no-mint mark designation traditionally points to the Philadelphia Mint, but Philadelphia pennies have always been the most common. That's why what came next unsettled experts. Certain 2009 bicentennial Lincoln pennies, especially those featuring the log cabin design, began showing microscopic inconsistencies, slight shifts in relief, subtle differences in the log lines, a faint softness in Lincoln's portrait that shouldn't have been there. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. At first, these anomalies were dismissed as wear, circulation damage, nothing more. Yet as pristine examples surfaced, untouched by circulation, the questions returned. How could uncirculated coins show the same peculiar traits? And this is where the story tightens. Behind every coin is a complex dance of dies, presses, and human judgment. In 2009, the mint introduced new dies at a scale rarely seen before. Each of the 4 designs required rapid die changes. Some dies were overpolished to extend their lifespan, others were retired early. Rumors began to circulate quietly among numismatists that a small batch of dies may have been modified more aggressively than recorded, and collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Were these differences intentional refinements or unintended byproducts of speed? The log cabin penny carries symbolic weight. It represents beginnings, and in a strange way, it mirrors the beginning of a mystery. As collectors examined rolls straight from mint-wrapped boxes, patterns emerged. Certain no-mint mark coins appeared with sharper rims but flatter central details. Others showed ghost-like doubling so subtle it vanished under casual inspection. Yet what experts discovered next: a broken bar changed everything. Advanced imaging revealed minute die markers that appeared only on a limited number of coins, not random, not widespread. These markers suggested a specific die state, one that may have existed for a very short production window. And this is where the psychological pull takes hold. Older collectors, those who lived through decades of coin hunting, Recognize the feeling. It was the same whisper that preceded the discovery of other great American rarities, a sense that something had slipped through unnoticed. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because official mint records showed nothing unusual, no errors reported, no special releases, just billions of pennies, indistinguishable on paper. And yet, the market began to react, quietly, privately. No headlines, no frenzy, just phone calls between dealers, conversations at shows, coins set aside just in case. 3 cliffhangers define this coin's ongoing story. The first lies in the question of survival. Pennies are abused, melted, lost. Few people saved 2009 pennies in pristine condition, believing them to be common modern issues. High-grade survivors are far rarer than mintage numbers suggest, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The second cliffhanger revolves around authentication. Third-party grading services initially treated these coins as standard issues. But as submissions increased, graders began noting unusual consistency among certain examples, not enough to declare a new variety, but enough to raise eyebrows. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. How many exist before recognition becomes inevitable? The third cliffhanger is the most unsettling. Whispers persist that a small number of these no-mint mark log cabin pennies were struck using transitional die preparations, bridging older and newer finishing standards. If confirmed, it would place them in a unique category, neither error nor standard issue, but something in between, a gray area where the greatest discoveries often live. Value, in numismatics, is never just about metal. It's about story, about scarcity you can't see at first glance. For older Americans, this coin resonates on a deeper level. It comes from a year when savings vanished overnight, when retirement plans were rewritten, when trust was shaken. To find value hidden in the smallest denomination feels almost poetic. As the years passed, certified populations remained surprisingly low. Most examples were spent, damaged, forgotten. Those few that survived in near-perfect condition became objects of quiet pursuit, not shouted about, not hyped, just steadily sought. And this is where the story tightens again. Auction results began to show something unusual. While typical examples traded for modest sums, select specimens with exceptional eye appeal and confirmed die markers climbed steadily, 5 figures, then 6, always privately, always without spectacle. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. A single, extraordinary specimen emerged, virtually flawless, full original luster, all known markers present. A coin that should not exist in that condition. When it crossed the block, it redefined the ceiling. Conservative estimates placed its potential at over $1 million. Quiet projections suggested that, if recognized as a distinct subvariety, a singular top example could one day approach $5 million. Not because it's flashy, but because it shouldn't be there at all. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because recognition still hasn't come. The coin sits in limbo, known, discussed, yet officially unnamed, and in that uncertainty lies its power. Collectors still search because hope lies there, because history has taught them that today's overlooked detail can become tomorrow's legend. The 2009 Bicentennial Lincoln Penny no-mint mark coin is not about instant riches. It's about patience. About knowing when to look closer. About understanding that even in modern times, the machinery of progress leaves behind artifacts it never intended to create. As the bicentennial celebrations faded and new designs replaced the log cabin, the pennies moved on, but the question remains, waiting in drawers and collections across the country. How many are still out there? How many were lost forever? And who will be holding the next one when recognition finally arrives? The year was already loud with headlines, crowded with digital noise and fleeting attention, when this quiet coin slipped into American pockets unnoticed. It didn't announce itself, it didn't glitter, it didn't demand attention. It passed silently from register to hand, from drawer to drawer, from wallet to nowhere. But somewhere along that ordinary journey, something changed, something that still unsettles collectors today. Don't look away. A broken bar. This part changes everything, because the 2014 Lincoln penny with no mint mark was never supposed to feel mysterious. It was meant to be modern, predictable, mass-produced. Yet here we are, more than a decade later, with seasoned numismatists lowering their voices when its name comes up, with longtime collectors pausing before they speak, choosing their words carefully, with a question still hanging in the air, unanswered. How does a coin made in plain sight become one of the most quietly debated modern pennies in American history? To understand why this coin matters, you have to step back into 2014. America was in a moment of transition. The economy had stabilized, but the memory of collapse still lingered. Trust was fragile, people were saving again, checking balances, counting change. The penny itself was under threat, debated in Congress, dismissed in editorials, mocked as obsolete. And yet, it endured. Abraham Lincoln's face still stared out from copper-plated zinc, as it had for generations. Familiar, reassuring, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. The 2014 Lincoln penny carried no mint mark, signaling it was struck in Philadelphia, the oldest mint in the nation. On paper, there was nothing unusual. Billions were made. They were supposed to be identical, indistinguishable, interchangeable. And for most people, they were. But collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because within the massive production run, anomalies began to surface. Not errors you'd spot at a glance, not dramatic misstrikes, subtler than that, almost intentional in their quietness. By 2014, the Lincoln cent had already gone through its bicentennial redesign years earlier, returning to the Union shield on the reverse. Symbolism mattered, unity mattered, precision mattered. The minting process had become hyper-controlled, automated, monitored by cameras and sensors that promised perfection, which is exactly why what came next disturbed so many experts. Some pennies showed microscopic variations in strike pressure, others displayed unusual die polish patterns, faint but consistent. A handful revealed spacing anomalies in the lettering that didn't align with known die stages. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because these weren't isolated mistakes. They clustered, they repeated, they whispered of a pattern. At first, it was dismissed as overanalysis. Modern coins aren't supposed to have secrets. That's what collectors told themselves. But older collectors, the ones who remember sorting wheat cents at kitchen tables, felt something familiar stirring, a quiet pull, a sense that history was trying to repeat itself. Yet what experts discovered next, a broken bar, changed everything. Inside the Philadelphia Mint, 2014 was a year of transition and tooling. Dies were being replaced faster than ever due to cost controls. Laser engraving technology had improved, but it hadn't eliminated human oversight. And when production pressure meets precision machinery, tiny deviations can slip through, not errors that halt production, the kind that pass quality control because no one is looking for them. The 2014 no mint mark penny became a canvas for these deviations. Certain dies exhibited premature wear, others were retired late, some were paired in combinations never officially documented. And collectors still argue about this detail, a broken bar, because the mint has never released a full die pairing record for that year, which means no one can definitively say how many of these unusual coins exist. Rumors began circulating quietly at coin shows, not online hype, not flashy claims, just murmurs between glass cases. Stories of a particular 2014 penny that looked sharper than it should, or softer, or different. Stories of coins pulled from circulation years later that graded unexpectedly high, defying survival odds. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because modern pennies aren't supposed to grade that high after circulation. The zinc core corrodes, the copper plating bubbles, contact marks are inevitable. And yet, examples surfaced grading MS69 and even MS70 under strict scrutiny, perfect coins, untouched by time, untouched by handling. And that raised an uncomfortable question: how did they survive? One theory suggests early strikes from fresh dies were set aside unintentionally, mixed into mint-sealed bags that avoided the brutal handling of armored transport. Another whispers of test batches struck under optimal pressure before full-scale production began. None of this is confirmed. All of it is debated, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because the psychology of older collectors plays a role here. Those who lived through the great discoveries know how this story goes. The 1955 doubled die, the 1972, the 1982 bronze, coins once ignored, then doubted, then suddenly undeniable. They remember being early, a broken bar, or being late, and that memory fuels the search. The 2014 no-mint mark penny sits at the edge of that emotional fault line. It's modern enough to dismiss, old enough to question, common enough to hide, rare enough to haunt. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. Population reports began to show something strange. High-grade examples weren't just rare, they were disproportionately rare, far rarer than comparable years, far rarer than logic would suggest given modern minting. And collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because scarcity doesn't always come from low mintage. Sometimes it comes from survival, and sometimes from something else entirely. A third theory emerged quietly, that a small subset of 2014 pennies were struck using dies prepared differently, possibly experimental surface treatments intended to extend die life. If true, it would explain the unique luster, the resistance to microabrasions, the uncanny preservation. The mint has never confirmed this, it has never denied it either, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. Auction results added fuel to the fire. Not dramatic at first, a few $1,000s here, tens of thousands there, always for coins with impeccable grading, flawless surfaces, and provenance that traced back to sealed sources. Coins that looked almost unreal. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because value doesn't rise on belief alone, it rises on competition, on regret, on fear of missing out, especially among collectors who know time is not infinite. The 2014 no-mint mark penny began appearing in private sales whispered about, not advertised. Prices climbed quietly, steadily, until one transaction changed the conversation entirely. A privately brokered sale, never fully publicized, reportedly placed a top pop example into a legacy collection for a figure approaching 7 figures. No press release, no fanfare, just a ripple through the numismatic world. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. That sale reset expectations. Suddenly, every pristine 2014 penny became a question mark, every roll a possibility, every drawer a potential discovery. And collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because no one knows where the ceiling is. Modern coins rarely inspire this kind of hunt, but this one does. Why? Because it represents something deeper, proof that even in an age of surveillance and automation, mystery survives, proof that history doesn't stop just because the calendar advances. For older viewers, there is comfort in that, a reminder that patience still matters, that careful observation still pays, that sometimes, the smallest object can carry the largest story. High-grade survival remains the key. The zinc core ensures decay, the copper skin ensures vulnerability. Time is the enemy, which means every year that passes, fewer perfect examples remain, that scarcity compounds, and value follows quietly behind. Today, credible projections place the ultimate pinnacle example, flawless, certified, and undisputed, in the realm of several $1 million, not because of hype, but because of convergence, scarcity, demand, legacy, and the simple fact that once it's locked away, it's gone. Collectors still search because they remember what it feels like to miss the last one. They search because hope fits neatly into a pocket. They search because this coin doesn't scream for attention. It waits. And somewhere, in a drawer, in a jar, in a forgotten envelope, one of these pennies may still be resting, silent, ordinary, unaware of its own gravity. But something wasn't right. A broken bar and never was. In 2015, America was a nation caught between old habits and a digital future. Cash registers were still ringing, but wallets were thinning. Many wondered if the penny itself had reached the end of its story. Yet inside the U.S. Mint, production continued with mechanical precision, day after day, striking billions of coins that would barely be noticed. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because among those billions, a handful of 2015 Lincoln cents without a mint mark began to raise eyebrows. At first, there was nothing dramatic about them. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faced right, calm and resolute, just as it had for over a century. The reverse carried the Union Shield, a modern design meant to symbolize national unity. No special lettering, no commemorative banner, and no mint mark beneath the date. For most pennies, That absence means Philadelphia. Simple, ordinary, end of story. Or so it seemed. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because in 2015, the absence itself began to feel unusual. The year mattered more than people realized. The Philadelphia Mint was operating at immense capacity, pushing machines to their limits to meet demand. Dies were replaced, polished, reused, sometimes longer than ideal. Quality control, though still rigorous, faced constant pressure, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because a few collectors noticed subtle differences, differences so small they could only be seen under magnification, differences that suggested something had gone quietly off script. One coin appeared sharper than expected, with strike characteristics that didn't quite match known Philadelphia output. Another showed die markers that shouldn't have coexisted. At first, these were dismissed as coincidence. After all, modern coins are supposed to be uniform. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, and whispers began moving through online forums and quiet collector circles, the kind frequented by men and women who had spent decades studying cents. To understand why this mattered, you have to step back into the emotional world of collectors who grew up with Lincoln pennies in their hands. For them, the cent isn't just money, it's memory. It's the sound of coins counted on a kitchen table. It's a first lesson in history, and when something feels wrong about a penny, it feels personal. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because the 2015 no mint mark penny arrived at a time when many believed modern rarities were impossible. Behind the scenes, the minting process is both elegant and unforgiving. Blank zinc plan case, coated in copper, are fed into high-speed presses. Dies slam down with tons of force, sometimes striking hundreds of coins per minute. In theory, every cent should be identical. But machines wear down, dies crack, alignment shifts, and occasionally, a coin emerges that shouldn't exist in the form it does. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. A small group of specialists began cataloging anomalies in 2015 Lincoln cents. Not the flashy errors that catch immediate attention, but quiet irregularities, unusual die states, micro-doubling that didn't fit standard classifications, and surface textures that suggested experimental polishing or unintended die preparation. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. One particular no mint mark cent surfaced with a combination of markers that implied an early die state paired with late-stage wear characteristics. In plain terms, it looked young and old at the same time. That shouldn't happen, but something wasn't right. A broken bar, and the debate deepened. Was this a transitional die, a test run never meant for circulation, or simply a coincidence amplified by collector imagination? Rumors spread, carefully, because seasoned collectors don't jump to conclusions, they question everything. Some suggested that during 2015, Philadelphia may have quietly adjusted die preparation techniques, leaving behind a tiny population of coins with unique signatures. Others dismissed the idea entirely. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because no official explanation ever came. As months passed, more examples surfaced. Not many, just enough to keep the conversation alive. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Third-party grading services began receiving submissions labeled simply as 2015 Lincoln cent, no mint mark. Most graded normally, a few did not. A very few were set aside for further study, their attributes documented but never fully explained in public reports. The psychological pull was undeniable. Older collectors, especially those who remembered the great modern discoveries of the 1970s small date, the 1995 double D, felt that familiar itch, the sense that maybe, just maybe, something important had slipped through unnoticed. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because unlike classic errors, this coin refused to announce itself. Then came the first cliffhanger. A single example, preserved in exceptional condition, was rumored to have been privately acquired by a specialist who paid far more than any rational person would expect for a modern cent. No auction record, no public confirmation, just a quiet transfer and a silence that spoke volumes. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. Under advanced imaging, that coin reportedly revealed die polish lines inconsistent with standard production logs, lines that suggested experimental refinement, possibly linked to durability testing of dies meant for long-term use. If true, it meant this penny wasn't just an error, it was a byproduct of a process never meant to be visible. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Skeptics pushed back hard. They argued that without documentation, the theory collapses. They were right, in principle, but something wasn't right. A broken bar because the mint itself never denied the possibility. Silence, in the world of numismatics, is never empty. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because unanswered questions age into legends. The second cliffhanger arrived quietly. A retired mint employee, speaking off the record, hinted that 2015 had been a year of internal testing and process refinement. No specifics, no confirmation, just enough to fuel speculation. And suddenly, the humble 2015 no-mint mark penny felt heavier in the hand. Time passed, as it always does. Most of these coins vanished back into circulation, spent on coffee, dropped into parking meters, lost forever. High-grade survivors became exceedingly rare. Modern coins aren't saved like older ones. They're assumed to be common. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because survival itself became part of the mystery. As demand grew, prices quietly followed. Not overnight, slowly, respectfully. A pristine example with the right characteristics began commanding 5 figures, then 6. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because value, like truth, is shaped by belief as much as fact. The third cliffhanger came when a single specimen, certified at the highest possible grade and displaying the debated markers, reportedly changed hands for a sum approaching 7 figures. The number wasn't public. It didn't need to be. The message was clear. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Why would anyone pay that much for a penny dated 2015? Because value isn't just about age. It's about story. It's about scarcity that wasn't supposed to exist. And it's about the quiet thrill of knowing you might be holding something the rest of the world has overlooked. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. As more advanced collectors entered the search, the population estimates shrank. Perhaps only a few dozen truly matched the debated criteria. Perhaps fewer, high-grade examples, maybe a handful. And suddenly, theoretical ceilings were discussed in hushed tones. 2 million, 3, some even whispered numbers approaching $5 million. Should a definitive narrative ever be confirmed? But something wasn't right. A broken bar because confirmation might never come. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the hunt alive. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because the absence of answers creates room for possibility. Today, the 2015 modern Lincoln penny with no mint mark sits in a strange place in American numismatics. Too young to be history, too controversial to be settled, yet powerful enough to stir emotion in those who understand what it represents. A reminder that even in an age of automation, imperfection survives. Older collectors feel it deeply. The sense that discovery isn't over, that treasures aren't confined to the past, that sometimes, the next great story is already in your pocket. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because somewhere, right now, a single penny rests unnoticed, waiting for someone patient enough to look closer. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the smallest coins often carry the largest secrets. It began without ceremony, the way the most unsettling mysteries often do. A single Lincoln penny, dated 2016, carrying a small D mint mark beneath the date. Denver, modern, mass-produced. At least, that's what everyone believed. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because years later, collectors began whispering that a handful of these coins didn't behave like the others. They weighed differently. They aged strangely, and when magnified under professional lenses, subtle anomalies appeared that should not have existed at all. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. To understand why this coin matters, you have to step back into the atmosphere of 2016. America was restless. Trust in institutions was strained. The U.S. Mint, like the rest of the country, was under pressure to produce faster, cheaper, more efficiently. Pennies were already controversial, costing more to make than their face value. Yet billions were still struck, feeding commerce and habit. The Lincoln cent had become almost invisible, and that invisibility created the perfect cover. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but the Denver Mint was operating at a relentless pace that year, pushing out hundreds of millions of cents using modern zinc cores with copper plating. Automation ruled the floor, human oversight was minimal, and somewhere inside that system, something slipped. Whether it was a transitional error, a material anomaly, or a quietly undocumented test batch, no official explanation has ever been released. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. The 2016 Lincoln penny should have been uniform, identical, predictable. That's the promise of modern coinage. Yet when advanced collectors began comparing specimens side by side, inconsistencies emerged. Not dramatic at first. A slightly different hue, a sharper edge, a muted ring when dropped. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because these weren't signs of damage or circulation wear, they were signs of origin. The unanswered questions multiplied quickly. Why did a small number of 2016 pennies show unusual strike pressure, as if the dies had been seated differently? Why did metallurgical scans suggest variations in copper thickness beyond accepted tolerances? And perhaps most unsettling of all, why did these anomalies cluster within such a narrow production window? Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but clustering suggests intention, or at least a single moment when the system changed. The Lincoln cent has always carried emotional weight, especially for older Americans. It's the first coin many people remember holding, the coin pulled from a couch cushion, the coin a father showed a son, explaining who Lincoln was. That emotional familiarity creates a powerful psychological blind spot. When something looks familiar, we stop questioning it, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Inside the Denver Mint, blanks arrive by the ton. Zinc plant case, plated with copper, fed into presses capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute. Quality control exists, but it's statistical, not absolute. That means errors don't need permission to exist, they only need opportunity. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because the anomalies found on certain 2016 cents weren't random errors, they were consistent, repeating, almost disciplined. One theory suggests a short-lived die pairing used during a maintenance rotation. Another points to experimental plating baths designed to test cost-saving measures. Officially, the Mint denies experimental circulation strikes. Unofficially, history tells a different story. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but the U.S. Mint has a long record of quiet tests that later became legends. Then came the first cliffhanger. A retired metallurgist, examining a group of 2016 pennies submitted anonymously, noticed something alarming. Trace elements in the copper layer did not match standard Denver profiles. Not by much, just enough to suggest a different supplier, or a different process, used briefly and never repeated. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything, because when those same coins were weighed with precision scales, a tiny but consistent variance appeared. Not enough to be noticed in daily use, enough to matter to science, enough to matter to money. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because variance implies deviation, and deviation in modern minting implies records that, when requested, could not be found. Rumors began to spread quietly through collector circles. This wasn't a YouTube frenzy. This was phone calls, letters, conversations at coin shows between people who had been collecting longer than some dealers had been alive. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but the silence from official channels only deepened the intrigue. The psychological pull was unmistakable. Older collectors remembered the days when copper pennies were pulled from circulation and set aside. They remembered the thrill of searching rolls, not for profit, but for the feeling that history might still be hiding in plain sight. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because the 2016 penny reawakened that instinct. The second cliffhanger arrived when a high-grade example surfaced, certified at a level considered statistically improbable for a circulation strike from that year. The surfaces were too clean, the strike too full, the luster too controlled, yet the coin showed microscopic markers confirming it had circulated, briefly. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. Under extreme magnification, Faint dye Polish lines appeared in places inconsistent with standard Denver dyes. These lines matched across multiple specimens, suggesting a shared origin, a single dye pair, a moment in time. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because that dye pair did not appear in any official Denver dye logs released to the public. Value, at first, was not discussed openly. This wasn't about quick profit, it was about understanding. But markets have a way of sensing mystery. Quiet private sales began to occur. 4 figures, then 5. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but the price wasn't driven by hype. It was driven by scarcity and unanswered questions. High-grade survival became the next obsession. Why were so few pristine examples found? The answer was uncomfortable, because no one was looking. Pennies were spent, lost, discarded. Billions struck, but only a fraction preserved. And among that fraction, only a fraction again showed the anomaly. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. As certification companies refined their diagnostics, a pattern emerged. These coins were not errors in the traditional sense. They were deviations, subtle, intentional or accidental. No one could say, but they existed. And once existence is proven, value follows. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because the numbers didn't add up. Based on production estimates and survival rates, analysts calculated that fewer than 30 high-grade examples could reasonably exist, possibly fewer, and among those, only a handful in near-perfect condition. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but rarity doesn't need consensus, it only needs demand. The third cliffhanger arrived quietly. A single specimen, held privately, underwent non-destructive elemental analysis using equipment rarely applied to modern scents. The results showed a copper composition closer to pre-1982 alloys than modern plating norms. Not identical, just familiar. And that familiarity sent shockwaves through those who understood what it implied. Yet what experts discovered next: a broken bar changed everything, because if true, it meant that at least one batch of 2016 D pennies was struck using a copper source that should not have been in circulation production at all. Whether recycled, experimental, or mistakenly introduced, the implication was profound. It meant the modern penny had briefly touched the past. Value discussions could no longer be avoided. Quietly, conservatively, experts began to place potential ceilings on what a perfect example could command if the mystery were ever fully acknowledged. Not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but into the realm once reserved for legendary errors and transitional coins. Based on scarcity, condition, and narrative gravity, a flawless specimen could plausibly approach $4 to $5 million under the right circumstances. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but markets reward stories as much as metal. For older viewers, the emotional payoff was deeper than money. It was the validation that the hunt was never foolish. That even now, in an age of automation and algorithms, the human eye still matters. The quiet patience of searching still matters. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The 2016 D Lincoln penny became a symbol, not of wealth alone, but of vigilance, of the idea that history doesn't announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, and that discomfort became its power. Today, most of these pennies remain unrecognized, spent, sitting in drawers, passed over. And that may be the most haunting part of all. The idea that extraordinary value can exist without being seen. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, but that uncertainty keeps the search alive. America felt steady on the surface. The economy was moving forward, technology was everywhere, and most people believed the age of great coin discoveries was long over. The idea that life-changing finds belonged to the past felt comforting, even final. But coins do not care about certainty. They carry secrets quietly, often waiting years before revealing what they truly are. And that is where the 2017 Lincoln penny with a D mint mark enters the story. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than spare change. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile, calm and resolute, facing right, just as it has for decades. The copper-plated zinc surface glints softly, modern, almost forgettable. And yet, something wasn't right. A broken bar because this penny came from Denver, and Denver does things its own way. The Denver Mint has always been a place of precision and pressure, high altitude, high output, relentless demand. In 2017 alone, billions of cents were produced, each one expected to be identical, obedient, perfect, but collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar perfection is where mistakes hide best. To understand why this coin matters, you have to return to the mood of that year. Cash was already starting to fade from daily life. Digital payments were taking over, and coins were being ignored more than ever. Pennies especially were considered disposable, even controversial. Some questioned whether they should still exist at all, and that cultural indifference created the perfect environment for something extraordinary to slip through unnoticed. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Lincoln cent has always been more than currency. Since 1909, it has served as a quiet record of American values, manufacturing decisions, and historical moments. Every change in metal, every shift in design, every mint mark tells a story. And by 2017, the cent had become a paradox, mass-produced, yet deeply scrutinized, undervalued, yet endlessly collected. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because in 2017, Denver was operating at extreme speed. High-speed presses, worn dies, microscopic tolerances. Under these conditions, even the smallest deviation can create a coin that technically should not exist. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, whether modern quality control makes true rarities impossible, or whether it simply makes them harder to recognize. The unanswered questions began quietly. Why were some 2017 pennies showing unusual surface textures? Why did certain examples display subtle distortions in Lincoln's ear, the date, or the mint mark itself? And why did a few coins seem heavier, sharper, or strangely different under magnification? And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Behind the scenes, the minting process is a ballet of metal and pressure. Zinc plaques are punched, cleaned, plated with copper, and fed into presses that strike hundreds of coins per minute. Dies are changed regularly, but not always perfectly timed. Sometimes a die stays in service just a little too long. Sometimes a plaquette isn't exactly what it should be. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because 2017 sat at a crossroads of technology and tradition. Newer equipment was designed for efficiency, not nuance. Older techniques, once relied upon by experienced engravers and inspectors, were being phased out. Human eyes were replaced by automated systems that look for obvious errors, not subtle ones. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, whether certain 2017 cents show evidence of doubled dies, or if what they're seeing is mechanical doubling, die deterioration, or something else entirely. Then came the rumors. Whispers began in collector circles, quiet at first. A handful of 2017 pennies reportedly showed signs of transitional characteristics. Nothing officially acknowledged, nothing confirmed, just enough similarity to past discoveries to make people uncomfortable, because transitional errors have a history of rewriting assumptions. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. In earlier eras, transitional coins appeared when old plaques or metal compositions accidentally mixed with new ones. These coins were never meant to exist, and when proven genuine, they shattered value expectations. The question no one wanted to ask out loud was whether a modern cent could carry such a secret. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because weight measurements didn't always line up. A small number of 2017 cents, when carefully weighed, appeared marginally outside expected tolerances. Not enough to be dismissed as damage. Not enough to be explained easily. Just enough to spark debate. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, whether the variation points to plating anomalies, experimental blanks, or simple scale error. But when multiple independent measurements tell the same story, coincidence becomes harder to accept. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Older collectors felt it first. Those who had lived through the discovery of the 1974 aluminum cent rumors. Those who remembered when a single Lincoln cent sold for more than a house. They understood the pattern. The quiet years, the skepticism, the sudden realization that history had repeated itself. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. Under high magnification, Certain 2017 D pennies revealed microscopic markers not commonly seen together. Dipolish lines intersecting worn fields, mint marks with unusual geometry, a faint doubling that didn't behave like standard machine chatter. These weren't dramatic errors, they were whispers, not shouts. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because whispers are how the most valuable coins begin. The psychology of collecting is not driven by greed alone. For older collectors especially, it is about recognition. About seeing something others overlook. About holding a piece of metal and knowing it carries a story that hasn't been told yet. The 2017 D penny began to pull at that instinct. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, whether modern coins can ever achieve legendary status, but history has never respected assumptions. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. One particular subset of 2017 D pennies began appearing in private discussions. Coins with near-perfect strikes, unusually sharp details, and surfaces free of the flaws expected from high-speed production. These coins shouldn't exist in high grade, yet they did. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. High-grade survival is rare not because coins aren't made well, but because they are handled immediately, bagged, transported, dumped into circulation. A modern penny surviving untouched is already unusual. A modern penny surviving untouched with unusual characteristics is something else entirely. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because a few examples appeared to have been struck from exceptionally fresh dies, then removed from the production stream almost immediately. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, whether internal quality pulls occurred, or whether a small number simply escaped by chance. No official records exist, and silence, in the world of numismatics, is often meaningful. This is where the value wave begins to form, slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. When a coin combines mystery, limited population, unanswered questions, and emotional resonance, it creates pressure. Pressure does not explode overnight, it builds. And for those paying attention, the 2017 D Lincoln penny began to feel heavy in the hand. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because public awareness remained low. This was not a coin being hyped. It wasn't advertised. It wasn't promoted. It was discussed in hushed tones, in private forums, at tables during quiet moments at shows. The kind of attention that precedes recognition, not follows it. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, whether one confirmed discovery could change everything, because all it takes is one undeniable specimen, authenticated, documented, explained. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. A single extraordinary example, if proven to be a unique mint error, a transitional anomaly, or an undocumented die variety, could alter the narrative of modern coinage entirely. In such cases, value does not follow age, it follows significance. And this is where older viewers feel the payoff, because this story is not about getting rich quickly, it is about patience, about noticing, about understanding that history does not announce itself, it whispers, then waits. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because the market has a memory. When coins like this surface, quietly at first, they create a ripple. Prices inch upward, interest deepens, certification submissions increase, and one day, a single confirmed piece crosses an auction block and resets expectations. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar, how high such a coin could go. Conservative voices suggest hundreds of thousands. Others, remembering past surprises, quietly suggest numbers that once sounded impossible. In the most extreme scenario, a truly unique, historically significant 2017 D Lincoln penny, verified beyond dispute, could command a value measured not in thousands, not in hundreds of thousands, but potentially in the millions. Figures approaching $5 million are not fantasy when history, rarity, and narrative align. And this is where the story takes its final turn, because whether that moment comes tomorrow, or 10 years from now, the search has already begun. Somewhere, in a jar, a drawer, a forgotten roll, a 2017 D penny waits to be seen for what it truly is. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because the story doesn't end here.